All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Fila, and I am a trainer and what's called a liaison for the Grants Gateway in Albany. And we are here to talk about grants management or managing your grant contract in the Grants Gateway. Specifically, it's for contracts with the AIDS Institute at the Department of Health, but most of this is generic to any other types of contracts you may have with any other state agencies or departments or divisions within the agencies. So what we're going to do is start with a PowerPoint, just a couple pages, going through some of the basics and some of the things you should be looking out for and aware of. And then we will go into actually log into the system and manage a contract from where it is now, where most of your contracts are, to getting it signed and executed. Okay, so again, this is Grants Gateway contract development processes for grantees. You are all considered grantees, meaning organizations that have received grants in the Grants Gateway. So what happens after your grant is awarded? So think of these grants. These are competitive applications that most of you went through. A lot of them for the AIDS Institute were a year ago. And in that time, things have happened, and obviously an award has been made. So a contract was awarded to your organization, and then the agency staff develops contract parameters. Things like how are payments handled, some of the language on the contract, and some of the details that you'll be dealing with. So that's been done. And now contract details need to be updated and reviewed. That's the step that most of your contracts are at right now. And what that means is there's maybe some changes that need to be made to the budget or the work plan or some language in the contract, and either the state agency is doing it or they're sending it off to you so you can do it. And that's all done, obviously, in the Grants Gateway. All right, so again, the agency develops the contract parameters. At this time, you are now doing some updates to a couple pages in the Grants Gateway. I'll get to those and show you them when we get into the system. So eventually, it'll go kind of back and forth. It could go back and forth between you and your program manager, but eventually everybody agrees that the contract looks good. All the details are right, and now it's time to get it signed. So it first gets sent to you, your organization, to get signed, and it's an electronic signature that you do within the Grants Gateway. And then it goes through several other levels of review and signature. In most cases, it goes to the Attorney General's office and to the State Comptroller's office. And after that, it becomes an executed contract when all the parties that are required to have signed the contract. So we're in the middle of that process right now. So those tasks that you'll get, there's two of them. One is called contract information requested. Like I said, most of your contracts are at that status right now. In this case, the program manager or the contract manager has reviewed the contract and is asking for more information, asking for you to make some updates, and they'll send it to you. Or in this case, or also the program manager is requesting a change in the contract, such as the budget or the work plan. So maybe you were awarded a contract. Maybe you asked for $150,000, but your award was $145,000. Well, in that case, you would have to adjust your budget to fit the award amount that you were given. So that's where we are right now. But again, that other task you'll see is grantee contract signature required. And as the name implies, it's time for you to sign the contract. So in that case, the program manager and contract manager and some internal reviewers, if necessary, have all gone through the contract, made any changes, approved any changes, and are ready for you to sign the contract. And of course, that's done electronically in the Grants Gateway as well. So what are some of the things you can work on while it's at that status of contract information requested? In the Forms menu, there's a section called Program Information. You'll be working on or saving your contract information, which is addresses. That's literally a 30-second thing for you to do, if that. In most cases. You might need to tweak something in the program-specific questions, specifically the project title. So when you applied for the grant, maybe you provided a project title that they didn't really want you to use, and now that's an item that'll show directly on your contract, so we might want to have you tweak that a little bit. Another item that you might need to work on is the budget. Like I said, maybe your budget was higher than what you were awarded, or maybe there's some things that need to be moved around. So you could update your budget items to fit your award amount or make any changes that were suggested by your PM. I know for a lot of these contracts, especially the LGBTA contracts, there probably aren't too many budget changes that need to be made. All right, work plan. So again, work plan was something you did during your application, and perhaps there's some tweaks that are required for that as well. Again, you'll be notified by your program manager, your PM, if there's anything they want to change about that. And then uploads. There might be some documents that you need to provide, and that's certainly the case here with these contracts. There are documents that you need to provide, such as workers' compensation and disability documents, and you'll have templates for some of them, or you'll have guidance for those from your project manager. So these are things that you would add or update in the pre-submission uploads, but most likely in the grantee contract folder, the grantee document folder. So that's where you're going to be making uploads to these documents that you provided. And then another thing you're going to do is preview your contract. There's a button in there in the Forms menu to preview your contract to see what it looks like on paper in a PDF with all of those things we just talked about all combined into a state contract. And that's something I would certainly do before I send it back, and certainly before you sign the contract. And as it notes on the bottom here, all these items are things that you're doing in the Forms menu in the Grants Gateway. So you may have received those templates via email or some outside method, but you're going to be doing it all in the Forms menu in the Grants Gateway. Okay, so the AIDS Institute contract has some specific documents, and I've just listed them here. So there's the workers' comp and disability insurance forms, proof of these items. You also have budgets for the next few years, budget years 2 through 5. So your contract right now, as you're going to be editing it, is year 1, and all the details are for year 1. And the assumption is that years 2, 3, 4, and 5 look pretty much the same or exactly the same as year 1. So if your contract was $133,000 for year 1, it's going to be the same for year 2, 3, 4, and 5, and the budget will be pretty much the same. Yeah, you might have different people working on different jobs throughout the time, but it's pretty much the same. But there's some guidelines here. If the budgets are different from year 1, please provide a budget for each year of the contract. And if the budgets are the same, please upload a statement that says it is anticipated that the budgets will remain the same. There's also 2 other budget pages, the equipment inventory and grants and other funding sources. So these are things that they obviously are self-explanatory what they are, and we'll look at those in a few minutes as well. There's the multi-year summary page, which includes category totals for all 5 years of the budget. So it's just showing you, since the Gateway only shows it year by year, this is a way to tally it over across the whole 5 years, so the health department gets a good idea of what things look like in your contract. The fringe rate documentation. So this is a statement of functional expenses from most recent audit or federally approved rate agreement. You'll get details from that from your program manager. The indirect rate backup documentation if it's based on federally approved rate agreement. And then any other program-specific documents if applicable. If your program has other documents that they need you to fill out or attach, obviously you'll be alerted of that by your program manager. Okay, so if you applied for some of the AIDS Institute grants, for instance, the LGBT B grants, it was a year ago. So you might not be familiar with the Gateway as you were back then. You might be new to it. So I want to refresh everybody on their user roles, because that's important. This is one of the things that our help desk gets most of the calls about. So you need to know what roles do what and if you're in the right role. Now, when we set up your organization, you send in a registration form, or somebody does, and we set up 2 users, and they're in the role of Grantee Delegated Administrator down here on the bottom left. This person we set up so that they can manage the other accounts in your organization. We don't add any other accounts. We just add the Grantee Delegated Admin, and we let you do the rest. So they add or edit user accounts. And they also manage pre-qualification. That's the document vault. So if you're a not-for-profit, you have to be pre-qualified at the time when your application is due. You also have to be pre-qualified when you're signing a contract. So you'll probably want to check that. You should check that when we go into the system here, and I'll do that for my kind of fake organization I'll be using. So there's a couple other roles that can be set up by the Grantee Delegated Administrator. One here on the top left is Grantee. And this person can edit contract and application information. They can submit the edited information, and they would get tasks from the system if they had, they would get emails from the system if they had tasks related to a contract or an application. But they can't sign a contract. So if you're a smaller organization and maybe only one person is working on the contract, you probably don't want this role of grantee because you can only do half of what we need to do here. But your grantee delegated admin can set anybody up in that role of grantee. But the people that can sign are here on the right. And you can see those roles are the grantee contract signatory and the grantee system administrator. They both pretty much do exactly the same thing. They have the same rights as the grantee does: add, save, edit things for the contract or application, everything in the forms menu. They can electronically sign the contracts, though. So that's something different, of course, that the grantee can't do. And you're going to need somebody in one of these roles. So there must be someone in this role or the grantee system administrator role for every organization, because you need somebody to sign the contract. So like I said, grantee system administrator, same deal as the grantee contract signatory. They do have a few additional admin abilities that we don't need to get into here. It's not relevant to the contracts. All right, so the bottom line is, again, make sure you have somebody in the correct role. Grantee contract signatory will do it all, same as grantee system administrator. And then grantee is somebody who can just make changes in the forms menu and save them. They can't actually sign it. So that grantee delegated administrator, the person we set up when you register your organization, they can add new users to your account, and they would follow this path here. They would go to organizations, and then they would go to organization members, and then add members, and then new member. And when they do that, they get this add edit members box like it shows here on the bottom. They add in the person's name, their title, their email, and I can't really get down here with my marker. There we go. And that person's role. That's, of course, the most important here, is picking the right role. One thing I want to point out, it's not on the slide here, but I just want to say, some people think they can change a role because there's kind of a drop down in there when you have an already established user and an already established role. While it appears the system lets you do that, that doesn't work properly. It doesn't have desirable results if you do that. So if you want to have somebody else have a different role, you can't change the role. You have to create a new account for them. So that's fine if some users have more than one username, more than one account. That's normal. So you might be a grantee delegated admin and a grantee contract signatory. That's fine. We don't have any problem with that. You can use the same email address. You can even set up the same passwords, so the passwords are in sync between the two. But regardless, every role for every user needs a new user account. So some of these users will get tasks in the system. And there's a certain criteria that will allow you to get tasks, and I'll show you that also when I log in. But if you do have a task, there's a couple ways to locate them and respond to them. The easiest is My Tasks, which is a field on the home page. And it would just tell you how many tasks you have. You can see on the right here, I've underlined it. In this case, the person has 5 tasks and 3 that are critical, meaning they're close to a due date. You'll probably have 1 task, if any. Now, you don't have to have a task in order to work on your contract. You can search for it too, or you can go to the task list, which is another search option in the Grants Gateway. And from there, you can find tasks or all tasks or certain tasks that are related to your organization, either by a person, by the organization as a whole, or certain keywords or grant opportunity IDs and so on. So we have several ways of searching through the Gateway to find the thing you need to work on. And here are those several ways. You could search on your contract by going through applications up here in the top, because remember, every contract starts as an application. You can search for it through contracts, and I'll show you that page on the next slide here. You can search for it through tasks, because if it's a contract and it's in your status, people should have it as a task. And you can search down here in the bottom on the home page in My Tasks. It's not really searching, it's just showing you the tasks that are assigned to you. So any one of these 4 ways should get you to the contract you need to work on. The easiest, though, being contracts. Well, the easiest being tasks, if you have a task. But if you don't, the easiest search is going through contracts, which looks like this. So if you do not have a task to view the contract, you can search for it by clicking on the contracts link and then searching through some of these parameters. So if you left it blank, like this shows, and hit the search button down here, you would find all contracts that your organization has. So if you only have 1 or 2 or a handful, that would be easy to find. But if there's a lot and maybe you need to filter through them, you can type in all or part of the grant opportunity name here. Or if you remember the ID, LGBT, that would help. You could type that in there. Or if you want to get specific into the status or the contract type or other information, or if you know the contract number. Let's say your program manager emailed you and said, hey, we've got your contract ready to go. It's in contract info requested. It's contract number C33555. And you could type in this field 33555, and you would find your contract. So many ways of locating it and getting to the contract to work on it. One thing that you'll find on the home page of a contract, so it's called the contract main page, is the period schedule report. You don't have to use this. You don't even have to look at it ever. But if you wanted to know what's going on with my contract, what's the status of it, or how long has it been in certain statuses, that's what this is set up for. So the state is really trying to adhere to its own rules behind what we call prompt contracting. And in prompt contracting, we want to make sure that we get certain things done in a certain period of time so we can get your contracts ready to go and signed prior to their execution date, prior to their start date. So this helps us identify how long things take and where they are at certain stages. So nobody's in trouble. I purposely picked one that had longer than it was allowed for. So we had 5 days at PM review scheduled, but it actually took 9 days, so that leaves us with -4 for that step. So it calculates and shows you how many days are left, basically so we get an idea of where we are. Again, nobody's in trouble if they're negative in some of these numbers. It just helps us to try to get to that date that we want to get to before, so we can have a contract executed before the start date. So here I am at the Grants Gateway, grantsgateway.ny.gov. I always point this out to remind people, don't go to www.grantsgateway. If I did that, you can see you get a site is not secure error. You can actually go to it by clicking on that button and going to the page here. But you see it's in red because the state doesn't use their, doesn't have the secure certificates on the www version of the website. So it's just grantsgateway.ny.gov. You go there and you're in business. Some people, you may have problems if you use other browsers. So Internet Explorer 11 is the system that the Grants Gateway has been built for, the way it's built in Microsoft's .NET platform. That doesn't mean it doesn't work in the other browsers. It just displays better in Internet Explorer. However, there are certain specific parts in the system that seriously do not work in those other browsers. And that would be the new work plan section. So a lot of these contracts have what we would call the old work plan prior to July of 2018. But if you were working in the new work plan, which these contracts won't be, you actually can't work on the work plan in anything but Internet Explorer. So to make it easier, use Internet Explorer. I know a lot of people probably aren't happy about that, but that's the way it is right now. We are working on updating certain things to make it equally accessible for all platforms. But right now, like I said, IE is your best bet. All right, so I'm at the live site I'm not going to go into, but I'm going to go to our test site here and log in as a user. And my username is JETest2, I think. And I log in, and it says, welcome, Jeff, and it affirms what role I have logged in as, Grantee Contract Signatory. So that's good. That's one of those roles, remember, that can not only save the information, but obviously I can sign the contract as well. So the layout of the screen here are up in the white bar here, kind of gray bar, are things you can search on. You can search in the portal for grants that are out there. You can search for applications that your organization might have. You can search for contracts, which I'll do. You can search for payments, which we won't have any. Progress reports, we won't have any. They're related to contracts. And then tasks. Maybe somebody else at my organization has a task, and maybe she's on maternity leave or something, and I want to find out what she has and take over some of those. So grayish bar here is how to search for things. Black bar here is just kind of reference for you. You can see there's training materials, a link to a video. We have a new manual that's being updated right now, and that'll be there soon. Organization is your organization. And if you need to set up new users, you might remember in that slide I showed you, that's where the grantee delegated admin goes to click on organizations, to organization members, and then to add members here. So I can't do it because I'm not that type of user, but that's where the grantee delegated admin would be able to do it. Profile is your personal profile. If you need to change your password, your email, your title, something like that, you can do it there. Log out would obviously log you out. The blue bar is what I call kind of the action bar. So right now there's only this help button here, but as we go through pages that allow us to save or edit information, there'll be a save button here, maybe an add button, so you'll see that in a few minutes when we get to those pages. All right, so view available opportunities. I could search for grants. This is what somebody did a year ago if you applied for one of those LGBT grants. That's how they started it. My inbox, ignore that. So that is a copy of any emails that might have been sent to you from the system. So I have two new messages because one said, welcome to the Grants Gateway, here's your user ID, and the other said, here's your password. So there's no reason to look at them. I've already looked at them in my regular email inbox. Now what's not here is tasks, my tasks. So remember I showed you that. If I was assigned this task, I'd have it on my task, I'd open it, and I'd be able to work on it. So if I don't, remember, that's easy enough to go up to contracts and search for it. So I go to contracts, and it remembers actually what you last searched for. So if you put something in the wrong field, so for instance, if I put LGBT here in the grant opportunity name, it'll never find it, right? Because that wasn't the name of the opportunity. It is, however, in the ID. If I search for LGBT in the ID, doesn't have to be complete, and I search and I look down here, I found it because in the application number is LGBTA. So if I could have typed this whole thing, I could have typed in, let's say, the contract number, 33702. So let's do that. I'll go down here and I'll type in the contract number, 33702. I hit search. Same deal, found it, and I can click on it and work on it. Now again, if you're an organization that only has one or two or a handful of contracts, just leave everything blank here and you'll see all of your contracts and you can pick which one you want. So in my case, here it is. It's LGBTA, happened to be application number 59. And like I said, contract number 33702. It's a multi-year contract. We know that it's 5 years, starting on 5/1/19, ending on 4/30/2024. Right now we're working on period number 1, the first year, which is from 5/1/19 to 4/30/2020. And it's in that status of contract info requested, which remember, I can work on. So let's do that. So you don't want to click on your organization name. You want to click on the application number. Click on that. And we're now, even though we clicked on the application, we're in the contract main page because the application up here is kind of the key identifier, but obviously it's tied to or has become a contract. There's a little details button here. You can expand and contract it. Just shows you, again, what role I'm in and that status that we're at and some of the other information we already talked about. Main page has the contract number and the term and that information we saw. We're currently in period 1. If we were further along next year, there'll be a period 1 and a period 2 listed here, and whichever one is bold is the one you're looking at. That period schedule report that I talked about, that's right here. If I click on it, it's going to open up a PDF, and I'll zoom in a bit. And I'll see how many days were scheduled, how many days it's taken so far, and so on. So right now, this one has 8 days scheduled to be in grantee contract info requested, but it's been 14 days, so we're at -6. Not a huge deal, but we want to get to that 4/1 date, so we want to get moving on it. 5/1 date, I should say. Okay, So that was the period report. Again, you don't have to do it, just an FYI, that's what it is and where it is. But this is what you do to actually work on your contract. You go up here to these green buttons and you click on Forms menu. That's where all the forms and details you need to work on reside. All right, so if you've done a contract, if you've done an application before, this should look familiar to you. Contract document properties are just the documents that make up your contract. So there's nothing you have to do in it. You don't even have to click on it. I just did to show you. This is a sample master contract. So it's kind of all the language that the state has in their contracts. And your contract is made up of that plus attachment E1, which is the AIDS Institute policy on personal health related information, and attachment M, which is the MWBE document. So you can look at them individually if you want. Those are things that you're signing eventually. But an easier way is when you do a contract preview, they'll all be integrated into that contract. So I would say don't bother clicking on contract document properties. Also, don't bother clicking on anything here. Print application, full version of the RFP, or application versions. Those things are related to the application, and you've done those a year ago. So the first thing we need to do is you can see this contract information. So there's a little error here, a red hand, and it says the page has errors. So let's take a look at it. And what that says is, please review and save this page for accuracy. What it's saying is that, you can see I picked something that has a lot of different addresses to show you. What it's saying is that there's addresses here for you, and we don't know which one is right. Which one is the primary mailing address, which one is the contract mailing payment address, and which one is the contract mailing address. So we're not actually physically mailing you anything, but it's going to be on page 1 of your contract, so you need to get it right. So I'm just going to randomly pick a few things, and you can see whatever you pick. Once we look at our contract, you'll see these 3 addresses will show on it. If they were all the same, it would just show a checkbox to say that they're the same as the first line. So we'll look at that. So I went through it, I select them, and then I hit save, and you'll notice that error has gone away. But save my page, and it's happy with the fact that I saved it and updated it, and now the error is gone. So that was easy enough, and we'll go back to the Forms menu. Another thing you might need to do is go to the program-specific questions. So you see I skipped project site address. We don't need to worry about that. Whatever it was in the application has no bearing on your contract. But program-specific questions, there's one thing that does have bearing on your contract. And this was a real application, so I want to be quick through it. I don't want to show the real answers here. But this is the project title. And this title will show on the contract. So what I'm going to do is actually just write something on it. I don't know how much room I have. I just write UPD for updated, just to show you when we look at our contract, it'll actually show this text. So you may not need to change it, but you may be told by your program manager that you need to adjust the line. I wonder if this is too long and it might wrap or look weird. And if it does, we can just change this to LGBT to save us a bunch of characters. So let's see what happens when we look at it on our contract. So I'll go back to the Forms menu. That was easy enough. So we did contract information, we did the program-specific questions, and here's our budget. So our budget in this case, there's no errors. And you would look, first of all, here at expenditure summary if there was an error. And the error would be this. So I've clicked on expenditure summary. The error would be if our total does not match the period total. So period total is what was awarded to our contract for the year, and total is what our budget adds up to right now. So if I went back to my budget, and let's just say I'm going to add, there's something in every category here. No, there's not here. So I'm going to add something in space property. Just going to add $1,000. Something, and let's say I have $1,000 here. So this should throw it off. Obviously, I'm now $1,000 over budget. So let's go back to our Forms menu, and we see the expenditure summary has an error. And of course, that's because it now adds up to $134,000, not the $133,000 that we were awarded. All right, so your program manager may ask you to make some tweaks. You might go in here and change some of the items that you've entered during your application. In my case, oops, I didn't want to go there. In my case, I obviously just added something bogus that I need to delete, and I'll go right here and do that. You can see the delete button here in the blue bar. Are you sure? Yep, I am. And I've taken care of that. And if I go back to the forms menu, and I go back to expenditure summary, once it refreshes here, you'll see the error has gone away. And no error. Okay? So, if you've worked on your budget before, you might need to make some tweaks to some of the titles or some of the descriptions or the narratives or something like that. Otherwise, if there's no errors here, there's really nothing you need to do unless you're instructed by your program manager. Same deal here with work plan. The way it was put in here in your application may be fine, but they may tell you go in and update some of the text here. So I'm going to delete everything because this was a real application, and I'm going to just put in some bogus text here, and you'll see what it looks like. Here is our project summary. So whatever is in this field is going to be verbatim on the contract. So in your application, you didn't have to fill out an organizational capacity, and that's fine. That won't show in the contract anyway. But this field here, project summary, will. All right, so I saved that, and all this text will be on my contract when we look at it in a minute. Here's another thing. My work plan period is wrong. So this should be 5/1/2019 to 4/30/2020. So I'll save that as well. Okay, and back to forms menu. This is, like I said, the old style work plan. So the objectives, in this case, there's 3 of them. And you can see, you can type in it. And hit save and make changes to it. You can go to tasks. I just hovered over the forms menu and clicked on tasks. And again, you can make changes if you need to. And hit save. So if you're instructed to make changes, do it. If you're not instructed to make changes, I would leave it alone. All right, so your objectives task, and I could have clicked on performance measures and done the same thing there. All right, so it's updating your work plan. Now, you've got your pre-submission uploads. These were uploads that you made during your application, but you've also got this grantee document folder. And there's some documents we want you to work on, and this is where they will go. So you're not going to put them here in pre-submission uploads. Even though there's a save button here, you could add things here. That's not where they belong. That was what you did during your application. So if we go to Forms menu and we go down to the Grantee document folder, this allows us to upload any number of attachments. So I have a folder here of 3 forms that were given to me by the AIDS Institute, which are templates that you'll be provided. So for instance, additional budget information. All right, so I'll put in my contractor name, the period, the federal ID, the vendor ID, and then I can put in some information here, funding source, total funding amount, funding period, program summary. So if what I'm doing is not self-explanatory, let your program manager explain it. But it says list all grant and foundation funding which supports HIV programs in your organization, excluding research grants. So this is where you're getting funding from other sources other than the state. All right? So it seems pretty self-explanatory, but if you want details, get it from your PM. Same deal here. There's another tab for equipment inventory, and this inventory must include all furniture and equipment purchased on this contract in prior years. So again, fairly self-explanatory, but if you need details, ask your program manager for it. So let's say I filled it out. I can do a file save as, and I'll just say just so I save it as a different name. So I'm going to attach that. So I'll go to my Grantee document folder. I'll click on Browse. and I'll go to the AI docs that I have here and attach this document. All right, I'll give it a name. I forgot exactly what it was called. And then if you want comments, you can. You don't need to. And then we'll hit save. All right, I get a green light. Information's been saved. Here it is. Don't worry about this document approved. That's not something that you guys deal with. It's something that the state agency does. And now I want to add another one. If we go back to our folder, I have some downloads that were provided to me. So here we have the budget forms. So remember, for the other years, we wanted to provide other budget forms. And there's a kind of roll-up on this expenditure space on this first tab here. And there's personal services salary, non-personal. So these are the same categories that you have in your budget. You just have to fill them out. And as you fill them, let's go back to salary. So let's say 40, and we'll say 30% for 12 months is $30,000. And if we go to the home page or the first page here, you can see I've got $30,000 in salary. Okay, so you may need to do this for multiple years, and I'm just going to save this. And I'll go back to the gateway and click on Add, because I've already added one, the additional budget info. I'll click on Add, and I'll put in my year 2 budget and hit save. All right, so I think the place where you're going to be spending most of your time is here in the Grantee document folder. Obviously, most of that time will be spent out of the gateway, saving the documents, filling them out, but eventually you'll come back here into your contract, into your forms menu, and you'll take care of uploading them to the Grantee document folder here. So what I just did was I kind of worked on it. You know, obviously I just put in a couple lines. I worked on it while I was in the gateway. That's fine, but realize there is a timeout in the gateway. So if you were sitting here and let's say you were on one of these pages where you're entering information and 20 minutes passes, you'll get logged out of the system and you'll lose anything that you hadn't saved yet. So if I started typing here and never hit save, if it logged me out because I didn't do anything after 20 minutes, I'd have to start that over again. So just be aware of that. Probably a good idea to get everything together first and then go into the gateway and work on it. It's no problem if you're in the gateway for hours and hours at a time. You just have to save every 5, 10, 15 minutes. So, even by changing the page, if you're in the forms menu and you click on it and you click on another page, that resets that clock as well. So saving or moving to a different page resets the clock to 20 minutes. All right, so I think I've done everything I needed to do. I can now send it back to the program manager, letting them know that, I filled everything out. But I might want to do a contract preview first. I might want to look at what my contract looks like with all that information I just did. All right, so let's do that. We'll go to contract preview. It's down here in the bottom of the forms menu. Okay, so we had clicked the contract preview. It took a few minutes, but it came up. We can see I've got 48 pages of contract here. So I've got my contract number. I've got the DOH address. I've got my SFS name and my Department of State name, which is Sample Health Organization. I've got that name, and it does fit. That's good. Okay, so we don't have to worry about shortening or abbreviating anything here. Remember, I wrote in UPD to prove to you that it's kind of live. Whatever's in that field shows up in the contract. I've got my addresses. So remember, the addresses were different. If yours were the same from this to this to this, just these check boxes would be checked on the second two. So that's why we have to enter those addresses, because they show there as well. Your charity's registration number, that's important to make sure that it's there. Your program manager will make sure it's there, and you should as well. And that's found on your organization page in the Grants Gateway. So if somebody needs to change it, your grantee delegated admin can change that on the organization page, which you might remember was the first thing I clicked on to get into, remember when I said you could add users. All right, page 2 is an overview of the years and amounts of the contract. So it's $665,000 spanning these 5 years, because in year 1 it's 133, in year 2 it's 133, and so on. And if you add those all up, it's 665,000. Okay, so that's what that is. If years were slightly different, obviously they would show different here. Page 3 is kind of a table of contents. What else is included in this document? There is an A1, which is the program-specific terms and conditions. So besides the state terms and conditions, the Department of Health and the AIDS Institute has their own terms and conditions. There's also a attachment B1, which is that budget we were filling out. There's the work plan. Remember, we looked at our work plan. There's the payment and reporting schedule. That's not something you had any input on, but it's part of it. And then there's 2 other attachments, E1 and M, and I showed you those, or I showed you where they were already. So those will be at the very end of our contract. All right, then it's the signature page. And nobody's signed here yet, but when I do, I'll come back here and I'll look at it and I'll show you where the signatures go. And they're obviously not a cursive signature that you're signing with a pen or with your finger. It's just a typed signature here. But obviously it's within a secure website that you've logged into, and it's perfectly acceptable through the state and has been for the last 5 years or so. Then we get into 25 pages of the state terms and conditions. I'm not going to go through all of them right now. You certainly should. So imagine we just saw those 7 pages of the attachment A1. Then it gets to our budget. Here's the breakdown of all our budget items. Like I said, I don't want to show you the real budget items here, so I'm going to skip through these real quick. These are all the different categories. And now here's our work plan. There's those dates, and this is that project summary that I had entered in. All right, so there's only 1 page of that. And then here's our work plan. And remember, I added some text. I added this text here. Here is a change. This is what our work plan is. Objectives, tasks, performance measures, another task, another performance measure, another task, and another performance measure. All right, there's our second objective, our third objective, and that was that for the work plan. Next, we go into the attachment D. Again, you didn't have any input on this. This does say that you have a 25% advance. So it's what's called a requested advance, where the agency, where you can request it and get paid that initial 25%. I don't know that all contracts are set up that way for these, but you'll know on this page what you're allowed. Whenever you see a table that isn't filled out, it doesn't apply to you. All right, so your claims are monthly and are due 30 days after each month. There are reports that are due, just the final report, which is due 30 days after the end of the contract period. There's other reports in Table 1 here. So there's other reports that are due. These are monthly reports, and it shows what period they cover. And for each month, they're due the end of the next month. So you've got 30 days to fill those out. And it says the program monthly reports are due 30 days after the end of the reporting period. So you'll get details on what that report is and how to file it. And that's my last page. So unfortunately, whatever is happening with not including those attachments, it didn't include the attachment, was it E1, and then the MWBE attachment. So those individual documents that, if you remember, in my forms menu, we're back here in contract document properties. These 2 documents should have shown, and this A1 should have shown, but unfortunately my test system is not doing that right now. All right, so I've gone through, and everything that I looked at looks good. I looked at my preview. Besides the things, because we're in testing, everything looks fine, and I made sure any of the changes I made are what they wanted, and I'm good to go. So now I can send it back to my program manager. So remember, everything we did was here in Forms menu. There's other buttons here. There's Status Change, which is what I'm about to do. Management Tools, there's really nothing you can do here. Add Edit People, it's too late for that. Check for errors if you want to see if there are any errors. You can click on that. And this actually does give me, that's right, I forgot about this. This does give me errors, because it's not really an error, and it's frustrating, I should say. It's saying information on this page is derived from other pages that were changed. So remember, I went into my work plan and I made those little changes. Well, by doing that, the system says, wait a minute, you made changes in that section. Make sure it doesn't affect all of your other sections. Well, it doesn't, and we have to take care of something of that. Because if I try to just submit my application now or my contract now, if I go to status change and then submit it back to my program manager, it gives me those errors. So it'll never let you submit it without taking care of the errors. So all you have to do for these is click on it. You don't even have to hit save. If I now go to Management Tools, check for errors, or if I click on check global errors up here, I have one less than what I had before. So I click on it, and yeah, everything's fine. Check global errors, now there's one less. So kind of repeat that 5 or 6 times, and we'll take care of those errors. If it was a real error that says, instead of saying, please verify, so this is saying, please review this page accuracy. If it was a real error, I would have to actually go in and make a change because I missed something that was a required field. In this case, I just have to view. Down to 3. Down to 2. And one more. All right, so remember, this was in the status of contract info requested, meaning they sent it to us, the program manager sent it to me so that I could edit it. I've done so, and now we'll send it back. So that's status changes, apply the status of contract info submitted. All right, and it's done that. If I click on details now, it's in program manager review. I can't work on it now. If I go to the forms menu and any one of those pages where I hit save, for instance, the address page, remember all the addresses here, there's no save button anymore because it's not something I can work on because I've sent it back to the PM. So if you've done this and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, I wanted to make those changes, you would have to call your PM or email them and say, hey, can you send it back to me in that status of contract info requested? So again, the contract manager, program manager has done what they needed to do, contract manager has done what they need to do, and they've now sent it to you to get signed. So it's locked all the changes in place. Everything is now finalized. Now, if you notice changes or problems, you can always get it sent back. But what I'm going to do is log in as that same person, the signatory. And again, I don't have any tasks, but that's okay. I can go to contracts and I can search. It remembers those criteria we used before, but you can type in different criteria if you need to. I can find the contract. There it is. Click on the application number. And notice it's in that status of grantee contract signature required. So remember, in the PowerPoint, one of the 2 statuses is this, grantee contract signature required, which of course means time to sign it. So before I sign it, I think I should go to the forms menu and I should go down to the contract and look at it. Now, remember before we did contract preview. Well, I don't need to do that now because contract version has been created. If I click on contract versions, there's an unsigned version of this contract. So let's take a look at it. Click on it. Open it up, and there's that document. Now, the thing we care about most, I haven't changed anything else, but on page 4 here is the signatures. Obviously, no signature there yet. So let me close it, and we'll sign it, and you'll see what happens. So remember somebody had just said in the chat to me they missed the status change thing, how that works to send it back. So when you're sending your document or your contract to the next status, you hover over status changes. You can click on it actually too, and you click on the status you want. So before we did contract info submitted because we submitted it back to our program manager. Now our statuses are, we can sign it, we can send it back to the contract manager. If it was a new period, meaning period 2, period 3, that's not where we are, so this button wouldn't work. Same deal with a modification. If we were in the middle of a modification, it allowed us to do that, but we're not doing that right now, so that button won't work. But I could say, no, there's something wrong with it. I need to get it fixed. So I could apply the status of contract manager review, and it'll send it back to the Department of Health unsigned. But that's not what I want to do here. I'm happy with it. I want to sign it. So I go to status changes, grantee contract signature complete. We click on that. Go to my contract. We search for it. We find it. We double check everything. Everything looks good. We go to status changes and we apply the status of grantee contract signature complete. It gives you this agreement that you should probably read. Basically says, yes, I'm allowed to sign on behalf of my organization. Will adhere to the MWBE policies of the state. And I haven't given my password away to anybody. So I click on I agree. And it's spinning up here again, up in the top. And what it's doing is it's signing the contract PDF with my signature. Again, just regular, Times Roman text. But that'll happen in a couple seconds, hopefully. And we'll be able to look at the signed contract and we'll be done. All right, so it refreshed. How do I know that my contract's been signed? Well, if I go to details, I can see contract package validation. It's moved to a different status. If I go back to the forms menu, I still can't make any changes because that's all been locked in place. But if I go down to my contract versions where we looked before, now there's not only the unsigned version, but the version that I signed. You can see Jeff Test signed it, and it shows the date and time stamp. And if I click on it, and I open it up, and I go down to page 4, you can see who signed it, what their title is, and what day they signed it. So eventually, it'll go through the statuses, and the state agency, Department of Health, will sign it. The Attorney General's office will sign it, and the State Comptroller's office will sign it. And after the State Comptroller's office signs it, now it's a fully completed, executed contract that you can actually begin work on doing your projects. So you're going to wait. You're going to get notification through email and hopefully through your program/contract manager that, hey, your contract's ready to go. So when you sign it, that's not the end of it. It, again, goes through the agency. It goes through the AG and the State Comptroller's office. So that could take, 1, 2, 3 months to do all of that. Obviously, we want to get it done before that 5/1 date. All right, so the sooner you do the things that we talked about here, the sooner it'll get through the signatures and get us closer to that 5/1 date.